Hello, everybody. Today I will be talking to you about how history repeats itself from the Red Summer of 1919 to the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. Over 100 years separate in Red Summer of 1919 from the George Floyd protest of 2020, but the struggle in both moments is hauntingly similar. In both cases, Black people were attacked. In both cases, they fought back. This is not just history repeating itself, it's America stuck in a cycle it refuses to break, and every generation, Black communities have had to rise up and say enough. In the summer of 1919, after World War I, thousands of Black soldiers came home wearing the uniform of a country they had defended in war. They hoped their service would earn them basic respect and equal rights, but instead of gratitude, they faced terror. White mobs fueled by racism, fear of Black advancement, and resentment over jobs launched brutal attacks on Black communities across the country in cities like Chicago, Washington, D.C., and rural towns in the South. Black homes and businesses were burned and lives were lost. Here I will be showing you a picture of a damage done in Chicago of a riot. Newspapers called it Red Summer because the violence was so widespread and bloody. But here's what made 1919 different. Black people didn't just take the abuse. Many, especially veterans, fought back. They used their military training to defend their neighborhoods, organize armed patrols, and protect families. It was one of the first large-scale movements in the United States history when Black Americans resisted racial violence publicly and collectively. It sent a message: we are not going to die quietly. And same in the George Floyd protest of 2020. Fast forward 100 years, and once again, we see a Black man pleading for his life. And here is the man. His name was George Floyd. George Floyd was unarmed, handcuffed, and held face down on the pavement with a police officer on a knee on his neck for nearly 10 minutes. His last words were, "I can't breathe," were heard around the world. But George Floyd's death was not an isolated incident. It was part of a long, brutal pattern of police violence against Black people. So when he died, the streets filled with people, not just in Minneapolis, but in every United States state and across the globe. Millions of people marched, protested, and spoke his name along with famous people and so many others. The Black Lives Matter movement became the voice of a generation tired of injustice, tired of fear, tired of watching Black people die with no accountability. These protests weren't just about anger, they were about truth. They demanded a new way of thinking about policing, justice, and equality. Here's a picture of a riot from the George Floyd movement. And we see how the pattern of 1919 and 2020, what connects these two is more than pain, it's the pattern. In 1919, Black people were attacked by mobs. In 2020, they were attacked by systems, police violence, economic inequality, and institutional racism. Then violence was often ignored by the media or blamed on the Black community. Now, even with cameras everywhere, people still try to justify what we see with our own eyes. In both eras, when Black people stood up for their rights, they were labeled threats. And in both eras, they were powerful because they refused to back down. What's powerful about both the Red Summer and the George Floyd protests is not just the trauma, it's the resistance. In 1919, that resistance was physical, defending neighborhoods from mobs, standing guard, refusing to run. In 2020, it was protest, organizing, voting, mutual aid, and raising voices on a global scale. In both cases, Black people made it clear they would not be passive victims. They would be agents of change. They transformed grief into action and action into history. History repeats itself when we fail to change the root of the problem. But resistance repeats itself too, and so does hope. The fight for justice didn't start in 2020, and it didn't end in 1919. It's ongoing, and in every generation, people stand up and say, we deserve better, we demand more, and we are not afraid. The question isn't whether history will repeat itself, it's whether we're finally ready to rewrite it. And that is my explanation to why both these events have the same pattern.